Hey there, welcome back YouTubers. This is Richard again, and welcome to part 2 of our Udu application tutorial. We're going to pick up right where we left off from the previous tutorial. You'll see I have the same project open with our preview frame set up. And in this tutorial we're going to go through and talk about the layout workflow mode in Udu. So let's go ahead and click on this button here for the layout. And you'll notice there's this outline that's appeared around our preview frame, and when I mouse over the preview frame we see this ID tag pop open that says content pane. Now the content pane is a special type of layout block, and in the layout mode you'll be primarily adding, arranging, scaling different layout blocks, and these are going to function as the containers that you actually drop content into later. Now the content pane is a special type of layout block. We'll get into some of the details of that later, but suffice to say for now that for the most part it behaves just like all the other blocks. One other thing I want to point out, I'm going to go ahead and click and select this layout block. When I click it, a block becomes active and you can see that the border turns solid once it's selected. The other thing I wanted to point out is that by default in Udu, the preview frame will shrink or expand depending on how many content blocks you have. So it's always going to fit to the size of your content blocks. Right now we just have one. You'll notice as I move my mouse over the edge of the content pane layout block here, I can click and drag and scale it, and the preview frame adjusts accordingly. One thing to point out too is by default it won't do that horizontally. So as I expand my content pane block here, the outside edge would be clipped by the preview frame. So I'm only going to see what's actually inside the preview frame. As I mentioned earlier, we can add multiple blocks. I'm going to go ahead and add one right now. You'll notice it has this funky name, new pane, blah blah number. I'm going to go ahead and select it, and you'll notice that if I don't move my mouse to the edges here, normally we see this move icon when I mouse over these different blocks. If I click and drag, I can move new pane up above, beside, or below, any direction, the block that I will drop it onto, in this case the content pane. You'll notice as I move my mouse around, the border I'm closest to becomes boldened in black, indicating where I'm about to drop the new pane block. For now I'm just going to put it above the content. If you click on the background, you can get rid of the properties, the style properties there if you want to see what's going on a little bit better. And now we see that sure enough, new pane, it has been rearranged and put above the content pane. I'm going to go ahead and resize it just a little bit more. Alright, that looks good. Now, if you're unfamiliar with HTML, what I'm about to show you may seem a little unintuitive at first. And what I'm about to show you is how layouts are handled within Udu, and basically what it means for a layout to flow. So right now these items are positioned one on top of the other in a vertical fashion. I'm going to go ahead and shrink the new pane's width here some, and I'm going to do the same for my content pane. You'll notice that they're still placed vertically in relationship to each other. If I click and drag the content pane here and place it beside the new pane, it's placed beside just fine. Now here's the part that's kind of odd. If you have blocks that are placed next to each other horizontally, they will all fit on the same row up until this happens. I'm going to scale out the new pane, and you'll notice that once we get to the edge of the preview frame here, it automatically shoves the content pane block down there to the bottom. And for some people this is kind of confusing. I just suggest you play with it to get a feel for it. The takeaway here is that as things move to the side, as you place blocks horizontally next to each other, Just be aware that if you take up too much space, the next one's going to get pushed down to the bottom. Now, if you just want to explicitly set one or place a block below another, the best thing to do is just to click and drag. We're going to place the content pane back below the new pane here. And now I can scale the new pane horizontally and not affect the content pane at all. You will notice, of course, vertically it will shove it down still. Now, one other interesting thing is if we shift and drag on a pane, we will affect its margin, and we can effectively position it wherever we want. Now, you will notice some peculiarities. For instance, as I move the new pane, due to the flow that I mentioned earlier, it's going to shove the content pane down. Now, placing items in this way gives you a lot of flexibility. You do want to be careful because sometimes it can be a little confusing, or maybe you arrange things and it doesn't quite make sense, like right now. Well, that's what this reset button up here is for. If you click it, it will take away all the margins and all that spacing and show you how the different layout blocks are actually placed relative to one another. I'm going to go ahead and kind of reset what we've done here. The new pane, we're going to set its width. You can enter percentages or pixels as mentioned earlier, just like the preview frame. I'm going to set its width to 100%. I'm fine with the height. And I'm going to do the same down below here for the content pane. The style properties will affect whichever the currently selected block is. I'm going to go ahead and change the background color for our new pane, and we're going to treat it kind of like a header. Go ahead and make it white. Bring in the opacity here. Maybe I don't want it at full opacity. And just to make it a little interesting, I'm going to give it a border radius and kind of round out those edges over there. Let's see here. Last but not least, let's go ahead and just kind of make our content pane color a little bit different. Oh, might help if I realize that you got to turn on some opacity there. Alright, and we'll darken it out a little bit just like that. Now, of course, there's a whole myriad of options here. Go through and play with all the style properties to see what they do and get a sense of everything that can be accomplished. In some future tutorials here, I'll post all the different cool combinations of effects you can come up with, and you'll start to see that really you're not going to be limited at all stylistically with Udu. Once you're happy with what you have, you can go ahead and, of course, take a quick gander at it this way. Show our toolbar again. I'm going to go ahead and click Apply since I'm happy with what we have. And we'll save. And that concludes the layout workflow section. In the next tutorial, we'll dive down into the content workflow and talk about how to actually drop content into these different layout blocks. Thanks again, and have fun playing with Udu, guys.